Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Automate or Die Trying, the new cybersecurity reality. I'm Michael Mays, and I'm your host for today's webinar. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping tips. Of course, everyone will be on mute during the webinar just to make sure that we don't have any sound issues. If you do have sound issues, please use the chat function to let us know, and we'll see what we can do to make some adjustments. Now, we'll be conducting 2 live polls during the webinar. We want to get some of your feedback live. It's a fun way to participate. Please do. And throughout the webinar, you have an opportunity to ask questions. We'll take some of your questions at the end, but use the chat functions if you have any issues. Now, today's webinar, of course, is being recorded. So after the event, it'll be available to attendees for you to see after it's edited. Now, today we have with us Armor's Director of Application Engineering, Paul Schroff. Paul, thank you for joining us today and for your expertise. And tell us a little bit about what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, of course. Like you said, my name is Paul Schroff. I have more than 13 years experience in security, compliance, automation, and cloud. I run Armor's security engineering and development teams here at Armor. What we want you to take away from this webinar is to understand your company's security objectives, how to audit your environments, and then how to evaluate what and when to automate. And then towards the end, we'll also take a look at how machine learning can apply in a security setting.
And so, just looking at today's agenda, Paul, we're going to talk a little bit about automating in terms of threat detection and response. We'll review what the SIEM, the SOAR, and how threat intelligence and those things work together. We'll talk a little bit about what can and should be automated. And then, of course, we're going to talk a little bit, get some of your insights on the future of artificial intelligence and machine learning in cybersecurity. And at the end, we'll talk about some of the resources we provide and take some of your questions. The first poll question, if we can kind of get that started here today, is really, we want to find out what some of your biggest challenges are. The question in our poll today, the first one is, what is your team's biggest challenges? Whether it's skills and talent, whether it's security telemetry, recovery from exploitation, or maybe it's Dave who says we don't need backups. It's a lot. There are a lot of options here, Paul, but we know that everyone has even bigger challenges these days as we're all remote.
Yeah, and I have our goofy thing up here, and if anyone's named Dave in the audience, I do apologize. You can blame me for this one. But you always have that feeling that you've got it, that you're taken care of, or that hey, things may be in a good spot right now. But maybe in this case, your backups are actually just sitting on another drive on the same system, that if it got ransomware, you just lost all your backups because they're sitting on the same box. So definitely something that looks like is affecting around 99% of people as well.
Yeah, well, let's, now the results have come in. 45% really say that the challenge is skills and talent, acquisition, finding those people, being able to retain those. 27% said that data processing and security outcomes were important to them, and 18% security telemetry. Only 9% said Dave said we don't need backups, but that's still folks who are still challenged with that, right? So let's talk a little bit about Armor specifically, Paul, and let's talk a little bit about our security platform as we're leading into this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got here what in a lot of cases is representative of what everyone's either heading towards or slices of what they're trying to achieve. One of the things at Armor is that we end up having to do all of the slices all at once. So, our business objective, which we'll be covering a lot here as you're looking at your own business objectives, is to provide world-class security for all of our customers and for all of our partners. So we end up having all of our slices, whereas data security, data input, the SIEM, and our SOAR platform, it all has to be here at Armor. So it's a really great place to at least look at this from the perspective of our customers and who might be trying to take on security. So for Armor, it's a multi-tenant security platform that brings security telemetry, data sources, network devices into a core security framework and a data processing infrastructure. We then layer on threat intelligence on top of that, both internal threat intelligence for us and external feeds that we've got access to, and route everything through our SIEM. We also have a custom response platform, which allows us to develop custom playbooks internally and allows our customers to be alerted in varying ways. And we're going to be talking about this in the webinar, we're also on a SOAR journey ourselves of Where are we at today? How are we scaling? And what are we planning on building?
Right. So, let's talk about these challenges and opportunities within, being able to automate some of these processes. What are some of those?
Yeah, for sure. So I do want to kind of take a moment and just, the talent shortage seemed to be a big thing here. So one of the things that Armor did last year is we published a white paper on some of the challenges in the security industry today. The main one is actually human error. So looking at talent and being able to say, do we have the right justifications? Do we have the right business objectives? And then how do we start looking at automating the human error that's there? Because Gartner last year said, of the security failures that are out there through 2022, 95% will be the customer's fault. In enterprise settings, by the year 2021, 50% will have unknowingly or mistakenly exposed storage, network, applications, or APIs directly to the public internet, which is actually up 25% from the year before. So there's really a huge opportunity here to leverage security talent, reduce human error through repeatable process and automation.
So let's talk then a little bit about the SIM, the SOAR, and threat intelligence and how those come together. We know they're not the same. Do they have to be something that you put together in conjunction with each other? Can you have one or the other? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that question comes up a lot, which is, what are the components that we're talking about here? What do you need for your security platform? And then this whole, like, what is SIM versus SOAR, and do I need one, the other, or both? And for Armor, the answer was both, because we wanted to play that game of all slices of the security stack. But for your business, it may not be the case. It could be that selecting a vendor that has one or both is the right choice, or it could just be that you just need the ability to search the data that you've got for specific outcomes. But otherwise, let's look at SIM itself. So this is the engine that collects, correlates, and alerts, versus the SOAR, which provides enhanced data gathering, whether that means getting onto a box and providing information, gathering raw payloads or raw packets from a customer endpoint. It also provides case management and a place by which you can provide custom workflows and playbook support. So really the question is, like, do you need them? Is it worth the money to go after it? Or for your business model, is it worth hiring developers to work with your security talent to build this yourself?
Right. And of course, threat provides that context for all of that.
Yeah, exactly. And so the threat intelligence piece of this is really kind of a table stakes thing of the community is here and working together, and you should be taking advantage of that. And there are paid feeds from a threat side. There's also feeds that are just provided by the community, and these are things that can be used to improve your detection quality and reduce the false positive rate that happens for your alerting.
Right. So you spoke a little bit about the SOAR journey, and and even mentioning that we're on one as well in many ways, or we're far along in ours. So let's talk a little bit about the different components of that, and talk a little bit about those roles.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be coming back to this a lot here, which is, I know we're here for automate or die trying, and one of the things I want to stop you from doing is dying while trying. So I'm backing us all the way up to the business case side. What is your business objective that you're setting, that your leadership is setting the direction for you as a security analyst, or you as the manager for your security teams? And there may be a security reason, there may be a compliance reason, you may be needing to get PCI certified, so you have a card data holder environment that you need to protect. What justifications do you have? And then what's your budget? Are you willing to go and build a SOC? You'll be going into the discovery phase next, which is, what are my assets? Am I protecting that CDE environment? Or does a vendor meet all of my business objectives, and I can just buy CrowdStrike and call it a day, or buy Armor and call it a day, and I'm done with everything that I need from my standpoint? That will lead you into the next piece, which is, if you're deciding, yes, I want to hire and build at least a couple of people into my environment, or an entire SOC operations team, at that point, you'll be asking different questions of, is a SIM required? Or will log search be strong enough for me to meet my company's objectives? And log search meaning, am I doing threat hunting and just have an understanding of a set of queries that can provide the telemetry that you need for your environment? How many people and what type of talent will be required to scale? You go back to the old school setup where you might have a bunch of TVs up on a wall and then a large SOC operations happening. But I want you to start taking the thought process to, I have these talented people that are working here. How do I sit them down next to engineers and developers and bring them together to build the automation that will allow your company to scale for your security outcomes and business objectives that you have. And then finally, there's the SOAR piece of this, which is how do you start looking at the internal processes that your analysts and your SOC has started developing and improving these manual steps and get to a place where you can convert known playbooks into automations. So on the next slide, we'll be looking at this, which is a lot of each one of the, and Mike, would you mind just backing up real quick here? Because each one of the L1, L2, L3 roles here, they each have their own part to play. And let's kind of walk through them real quick, which is L1 typically is the pull data related to an incident, compare threat feeds, triage steps, do the false positive evaluation, apply severity calculations. That'll lead you into L2, whether there's an escalation needed or not. The L2 is going to go in there, bring context clues, bring in surrounding events, prove that an incident did or did not happen, and help investigate how it happened, how they got into the environment, and what was the actual outcome from it. Was there data exfil? Do I just have persistence on my box? Finally, there's L3, which is how do I take these incidents and telemetry that's in front of me and apply into the greater landscape? There may be a set of IOCs that are not quite available yet from your review or from a rule that you may have, and their job is to go and find those, maybe like a bad IP or a bad URL or a hash that's propagating in your environment, and feed that back down into the machine of how do I correlate against those things. And then finally, the leadership piece. You've got to have the leadership piece that says, I'm providing the direction, the training, and ensuring that the company objectives that we set out to achieve are being met through all of the processes that we're defining as a team.
And Paul, I understand it's really not so easy as just, automating, one single process like the L1 processes or the L2s. It's really an issue of, as you said, the security outcomes that you're trying to achieve, right?
Exactly.
So, in that conversation, then, what can and should be automated, really? As we were saying, whether it's, those L1s or some combination of L1 and L2 alerts. Yeah,
and where we're going with this and where I want you to be thinking about this from the security automation side is, I guarantee you that there's a lot, especially on the webinar, there's a lot of you guys that are in a place where you're like, I can write awesome automations right now. I've got the skill set. I understand what to write. I understand forensics. I understand how people get into boxes. I know how to get into a session and kill a specific person's access to a terminal. I know how to write WAF rules and update signatures, or even maybe you can automatically discover what those signatures are and provide that as feedback into the machine. But what I want to focus the team around is, if Mike gets a new alert in and his playbook is, well, I'm going to start doing some research and I'm going to apply what I think is best on this specific automation or the specific resolution to this alert. That's probably not a place where you're ready to start automating. What the example could look like is Mike gets a new alert in, looks up a SOC playbook, follows steps 1 through 4 to provide resolution, and then closes the task out and sends a ticket off with that's automatically provided inside the response. That's a place where you're like, yes, this is now an automation that we can write. And where I want to advise you guys on is start small. If we look at a set of L1 steps here, where maybe gather triage data, pull in threat information, assign the severity, maybe your first step of automation is get into the box and get the triage data, pull that back to your case management screen. That may be your first step for that. It could be, I know that an IP came in. Let me update my firewall with that IP saying, alert me on future uses from this IP.
And of course, once you have that new thread and you've identified it, then you can you can automate that process for finding it again. So let's move to our next poll question. As we continue to move forward, I want to get some of your feedback here on the second one. So on this one, we want to ask you, where are you in your SOAR journey? Where, are you evaluating some kinds of solutions? Are you, just now beginning to think about it? Are you beginning to automate your L1 processes or some combination? And it looks like even, the numbers are still just coming in, Paul, but an overwhelming majority says that they're thinking about a SOAR platform. So they're really thinking about orchestration and automation. And another 33 say, Dave says we don't need a SOAR.
Oh man, Dave got us again.
Yeah, 67% say that we're thinking about a SOAR platform. And the other percentage of all other respondents is that they, have been at least told that maybe they don't need a SOAR.
Yeah, it's probably a great point to kind of go back to those beginning steps, which is, what are your business objectives? It may be that you're just needing to provide compliance for your environment, and there's a lot of tools and vendors out there that can help you with that.
Right. More
Could
about
be,
outcomes than
right.
rules. Yeah.
Yeah, and it could be, I need to protect and secure my critical application from any type of intrusion or any type of downtime.
Right.
Those could be aspects that you can start drawing a conclusion to. I'm going to start needing automation and orchestration of my security layer so that my application stays online.
Yeah.
So it's going to be really important to say we have objectives that point to a fact that we want to spend money on protecting assets that we deem worthy of needing protection or compliance. So just going back to that build versus buy, the SOARs are expensive to build and they're also expensive to buy. At Armor, we've had to go through that same internal dialogue year over year of how much of this do we build ourselves and how much of this do we leverage vendors for.
Right. Well, Paul, let's move now to talk a little bit about the future of what we're seeing and get some of your input on that as a subject matter expert. What is the future of artificial intelligence and machine learning in terms of security postures?
Yeah, there's a quote down here at the bottom, and I'll just read it out loud here, which is, you might already be aware or have intuitions of some relationships in your data, but you might not be able to prove or quantify them. This is where machine learning can help. And so this is where I want to start everyone's thought process off, which is, when we're looking at what questions we want to answer with our data, it can kind of come in a couple of different routes. There's a short route or a quick route that I'm talking about here, which is anomaly detection. Anomaly detection comes in a lot of different forms. It could just be event distribution. A common one that we see is user behavior analytics. Those are starting to get built into a lot of self-service platforms, whether it's AWS or Azure, QRadar. These guys, Exabeam, they all have a bunch of really good built-in, turn it on. I don't need any specialized resources to run this. However, you probably will need some care and feeding between your SOC and those teams that are running that platform. Security engineering team may be running that platform. Because as anomalies do alert, it will create fatigue if you're not going back to tune that and say, okay, this anomaly did provide value. My CPU is high in my box. Great, that's awesome. I had a large data exfil at some time. Is that bad? Is that good? And unless you're tuning and kind of providing that care and feeding, it'll end up just causing everyone to say, that platform sucks, I'm not going to use it. So that being said, if you are doing that, there's a tremendous amount of value that can come out of, if you don't have a rule or a specific thing that you're looking for, the anomaly detection can provide you some ability to understand something's changed in my environment. I need to go investigate what's going on. And that'll help you trigger well, what do we want to do about this? What's the playbook look like? And really help train your L2s and L3s response to that. Then there's the other side, which is actually the really exciting side of machine learning, which is, how do I ask questions of my data? You're going to require specialized resources or specialized talent, in this case, that's going to have a skill set that will allow you to normalize and enrich your data. Look at filters, classifiers, clustering engines, and associations inside the data. They'll let you do feature extraction on top of your data and allow your questions, which we'll go over there some in a second, allow your questions to be answered. They'll also recommend to you, data scientists will recommend to you, hey, based on your data, based on your questions, here's the techniques, and here's what we're going to need in order to build it. You might be prepared to host your own infrastructure, whether this is a data lake or a data processing tier, or building out something that may be inside one of these hyperscale clouds like Amazon or Azure. So the cool questions that you can ask, got some examples here, is like, is this correlation an attack or not? What kind of attack does this look like? Should my analyst look at this alert? So not necessarily like, is there an anomaly that's happening in the environment, or hey, this CPU spiked on this box, but is this worthy of my attention based on data and training that I've done inside my machine learning platform? It also allows you to ask questions of the future. When will this system encounter another exploit? And that allows you to assign threat indexes on top of your systems for critical assets. So there's a lot of cool ways to think about machine learning in the security landscape. And one of the ways, and MIT has a research paper on this from last year or the year before, which is how do you take an entire security team and say they aren't doing my normal security L1, L2 activities? All they're doing is training my machine learning platform. That could be an end goal of the machine learning lifecycle.
Those are all great points for all of our audience who's thinking about implementing a SOAR as well, and thinking of all that talent that you certainly need, and giving them some options on both the quick and the long road. So let's talk a little bit about plans of actions and maybe talk about a couple of examples.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at the business objectives, it's going to be audit your environment and then evaluate what and when you're going to provide automations for your business objectives, which may be scaling, it may be quick to resolution, it may be how do I provide answers to every one of my alerts. So this is a business and internal decision that you guys have to make from your side to decide where you want to be.
So, just a little bit about Armor, of course, how we also have a great deal of automation in our processes, right?
Absolutely, and I think we had talked about this slide being a place to look at a lot of the telemetry that we bring in. When you're looking at, and let's maybe reference MITRE in this case, where there's a lot of tactics that are out there that you're trying to provide coverage for. I want to encourage you, as you guys are looking at security and telemetry, are you able to provide the quality data that will go into being able to alert on the things that are important to detect in your environment? And MITRE is a great framework to kind of follow the tactics, techniques, and procedures all the way down to here is the rule you have, and proving that you have the data to be able to trigger that. So this is a good slide of here's a typical on-site on-prem environment where you may be hosting your own VMware infrastructure. You could use a vendor like Armor to provide IDS and log collection, malware, vulnerability, kind of all of the things that may be table stakes based on your business objective inside your environment.
So, some examples here. I know you have a couple of business use cases here.
Absolutely. So just running through some examples here, because we talked about, hey, we're automating or die trying. Always start with a business case. And in this case, referring to an example that I had said earlier of how do I secure this company's business critical application? Great, we're going and we're doing the evaluation. Turns out it's actually an in-tier application with a WAF, load balancer, we got a web tier, we got an application tier, and a persistence tier on the back end. Security Operations Center is going to say if this is coming from a vendor or this is coming from your own Security Operations Center inside your company. Hey, one of the things that we need to do as part of this is to secure the persistence layer from unauthorized access. Meaning the example we had earlier of someone has accidentally dropped in a 0/0, allowing anyone on the internet to access this specific subnet or this specific persistence tier or database has now happened. And we saw that Gartner's predicting 50% of the time this is going to happen in the enterprise. I know I've been there where I've been like, I can't access this dang thing. Let me just quickly drop in this /0 rule and see if I can actually hit it real quick. That is going to expose you, and you need to be able to alert on that. So that's one of the things that SOC's recommending to us is, hey, let's make sure we have a rule for this. Awesome. Well, what's that playbook look like? Let's pretend like we're in AWS. This is going to be log into AWS, find the security group by ID that got referenced in our alert. There's going to be an inbound rule with 0/0. We're going to remove the rule and then escalate to the system's owner. Those are your steps for automation.
Yeah. So, and another example, for those who are trying to achieve compliance, in this case, PCI DSS for finance.
Yeah, so another great example of our business use case is by next year, we're going to be DSS 3.2 certified. You're going to need an inventory of all of your CDE systems. Security Operations Center says of all of the different things that PCI provides, we're going to need to at least provide malware protection for Section 5 of PCI. One of the things you can do is leverage Armor in this case, just a shameless plug here for us, which is leverage Armor to deploy malware protection for Windows and Linux inventoried hosts. The playbook could be, I have Chef server on my side, so I'm going to write a Chef playbook to deploy the Armor agent. I'll be deploying and testing on stage systems. Create a release CMR because we're PCI and we got to have everything being tracked on our side through a release process. And then finally promote our stage changes up to production and deploy out the Armor agent through all of our production hosts.
So here in a third example, really just in terms of trying to provide security outcomes.
Yeah, here at Armor, it's important for all of our threat feeds to be part of every SIM event process that goes through. So as they're updated live, as our own internal teams are providing remediation and alerting and understanding of what's happening in our environment, they're going back to our threat platform and saying, hey, this IP looks bad. This is now a medium. The reputation for this one is block everything that I see. Make sure customers know that across all of our platforms. So even if one customer experiences a set of suspicious behavior or exploit style behavior for a specific machine, we'll take that back and feed it back into the entire machine so that every customer can take advantage of that. The business use case here is to provide world-class security outcomes. Our SOC operations center here is saying, hey, make sure that our SIM has every one of these threat feeds live and updated continuously. So the playbook here is we got to update this automatically. An analyst registers an IP for reputation. We need to have a system of eventing inside the backend that updates and sends an event to a Lambda service on our side to do the update. It'll take the IP, and then the third step is update our SIM database with the new threat intel.
Okay. So we want to move now. We want to take some of your questions if you have them. If you have some questions, you can enter them into the chat function. We can see them there as well. And Paul, what are some of the most common questions really that you get about automation from customers?
Yeah, I think the big one is what do I automate? And that's why I've tried to focus our webinar around there is business use cases from your leadership. So the question needs to be, where is leadership wanting to go? And I brought up earlier about here's in the security community, there's a lot of really talented individuals that have a tremendous amount of experience that it's just spilling out of them. They're just like, well, let's do this. We got this. They have a bunch of great ideas. Leadership needs to be able to take those ideas, lay them against the objectives, and then allow them to direct the construction of those into playbooks, repeatability, and then automation.
Great. I want to remind everyone too, please, after the webinar, give us some feedback. Let us know how we've done. Tell us about, other things that you may like to hear from us. Watch for an email and you can respond to that. So please give us some feedback on and make sure that help us to deliver content that's really relevant to you. Also, I want to mention that Armor has a number of resources. Please visit the Armor website. You'll find case studies and you'll find white papers and you'll find lots of information on our Armor cloud security platform. You can also find threat intelligence and other things there as well. So please visit the site and learn more about Armor. Paul, I want to thank you so much for your expertise today and spending the time with us and everyone here. Thank you.
I'm very glad to be here. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, and thank you everyone who has joined the webinar today for participating, and please give us some feedback.